Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Book Summary Podcast. Today we're going to be diving deep into Make It Stick, the Science of Successful Learning.
Oh, yeah.
This book really blew my mind. I thought I knew a thing or two about learning, but it turns out a lot of what we think works, well, it doesn't.
Right.
So if you're like me and you're fascinated by this idea of hacking your learning, hit that like button and subscribe.
Yeah.
So you don't miss any future deep dives.
Absolutely.
You're going to want to take notes on this one, trust me.
It's true. Make It Stick challenges a lot of our assumptions about learning.
Right.
For example, how many times have you reread notes or a chapter thinking that repetition is the key to remembering it?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I practically wore out my highlighter in college.
Yeah.
But honestly, I can't say it always helped me ace those exams. So what does Make It Stick say about rereading?
The book calls out rereading as one of those common misconceptions. It turns out that rereading often just creates a false sense of familiarity.
Right.
Not true understanding. You think you know it because it looks familiar, but when it comes to actually applying that knowledge, poof, it's gone.
Right.
Think of it like this. Your brain forms much stronger connections when it actively retrieves information compared to just passively absorbing it through rereading.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if simply rereading isn't effective, what does Make It Stick recommend?
The book champions effortful retrieval. This is the idea that the harder your brain has to work to recall something, the better you learn it.
That's really counterintuitive.
Right.
Why would making things harder on ourselves actually lead to better learning?
Think about learning to fly a plane.
Oh, gosh.
Would you feel comfortable with a pilot who'd only read about flying in a textbook or even watched hours of videos?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Definitely not sending my virtual self on that flight.
Right. Make It Stick uses that analogy.
Yeah. Right. To illustrate the point, pilots who train in realistic simulators where they have to actively solve problems and make decisions learn much more effectively than those who passively absorb information.
Makes sense.
Same goes for learning anything new. Actively engaging with the material and pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, even when it feels difficult, is what actually makes it stick.
So instead of just highlighting and rereading, we need to actually test ourselves and force our brains to actively recall the information.
Exactly.
It's like giving our brains a mental workout.
They call this retrieval practice.
Oh, okay.
And the research supporting it is pretty compelling.
Yeah.
Make It Stick highlights a study from Columbia Middle School where students who were regularly quizzed scored significantly higher on exams than those who weren't.
How much higher are we talking?
A whole letter grade higher on average.
Wow.
Retrieval practice is like a secret weapon for learning. Okay, I'm starting to see how this book is challenging my assumptions already. I need to rethink my whole learning game plan.
Yeah.
But before I toss out my highlighters, are there other ways to do this retrieval practice besides quizzes?
Absolutely. Think about explaining a concept to someone else in your own words. Using flashcards, or even trying to recall everything you remember from a chapter without looking back.
Right.
All of these methods force you to actively retrieve the information, making those neural connections stronger.
So by making our brain sweat a little, we actually learn more effectively.
It's counterintuitive.
That's a game changer.
But it's true.
Right.
And retrieval practice also helps you calibrate your judgment of what you actually know versus what you think you know.
Right.
It exposes those knowledge gaps so you can focus your efforts where they're needed most.
I can see how that's especially helpful when you're studying for a big test or preparing for an important presentation.
Yeah.
No more last-minute cramming and hoping for the best. Now, another thing that often trips me up is feeling overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information I need to learn.
Oh, yeah.
Does Make It Stick offer any strategies for managing that feeling of information overload?
It does. Make It Stick emphasizes the importance of moving beyond just memorizing facts and instead focusing on building what they call mental models. Think of it like this. Simply memorizing a bunch of facts is like having all the parts needed to build a house, but not knowing how to put them together. You might have all the wood, nails, and bricks, but without a blueprint or an understanding of how those pieces connect, you can't actually build the house.
So mental models are like those blueprints, right?
Exactly.
They provide a framework for understanding how different concepts relate to each other.
They help you organize information in a meaningful way so you can actually make sense of it.
Yeah.
and apply it in different situations.
That's a powerful way to think about it.
Right.
Instead of just trying to cram isolated facts into my brain.
Yeah.
I need to focus on building those mental frameworks. But how do we actually go about building these mental models? What does Make It Stick say about that?
The book highlights the importance of what they call rule learning, or extracting the underlying principles that connect different pieces of information. They use a great example of a baseball batter trying to hit a pitch.
Interesting.
The batter doesn't just rely on rote memorization to figure out what kind of pitch is coming.
Right.
Instead, they develop a complex mental model based on various cues, the pitcher's stance, the spin of the ball, the situation on the field, and so on.
Wow.
This mental model allows them to quickly process information and make decisions in real time.
So it's about going beyond just memorizing the steps and actually understanding the why behind those steps. It's like figuring out the underlying rules of the game so you can adapt to any situation.
Exactly. It's like having a deeper understanding of grammar allows you to construct sentences you've never encountered before. You're not just mimicking, recreating.
That's so helpful. And I bet this approach is especially valuable for people who, like me, sometimes feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information out there.
Right.
Instead of getting bogged down in all the details, you can focus on those key principles and how they connect.
Yeah.
It's like decluttering your brain and focusing on the essential structural elements.
You got it. Make it stick. Even contrasts. Rule learners with example learners. Rule learners focus on extracting those underlying principles, which allows them to be more adaptable and solve problems in new situations. Example learners, on the other hand, tend to rely on memorizing specific examples, which can be limiting.
So by focusing on understanding the rules, instead of just memorizing examples, we become more versatile and better problem solvers.
That's the idea.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, we've talked about retrieval practice and mental models. What other mind-blowing strategies does Make It Stick suggest for improving our learning?
Well, this one might surprise you. Okay.
Because it seems counterintuitive, but it's called interleaving.
Interleaving.
What is that, and why would it be surprising?
Imagine you're practicing playing the piano.
Okay.
Most people might spend an hour practicing one song over and over until they get it right.
Yeah.
But Make It Stick suggests that it's actually more effective to mix things up.
Really?
Instead of practicing one song for an hour, you might practice a few different songs, switching between them every 15 minutes or so.
Wait, so instead of mastering one thing before moving on to the next, you're saying we should intentionally jump between different topics or skills. Wouldn't that just make things more confusing?
It might feel that way initially, but hear me out. Research shows that this technique called interleaving actually leads to better long-term retention and versatility.
Really?
It forces your brain to constantly retrieve and reapply information in different contexts, which strengthens those neural connections and makes the learning more robust.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
So even though it might feel less productive in the moment, interleaving actually helps us learn more effectively in the long run.
Exactly. Think about it this way.
Okay.
If you practice shooting free throws in basketball, you'll get really good at shooting from that specific spot.
Right.
But if you mix it up and practice shooting from different spots on the court, you'll develop a more adaptable skill set that can be applied in a variety of game situations.
Okay, that makes sense. By varying our practice, we're essentially training our brains to be more adaptable and versatile.
That's right.
We're not just learning the steps, we're learning how to apply those steps in different contexts.
That's the power of interleaving.
Wow.
And Make It Stick shares a fascinating example of this in action.
Okay.
Farmers Insurance trains new agents using a method that seems random at first.
Okay.
They introduce key concepts and skills in a seemingly jumbled sequence, constantly circling back and adding layers of context as the training progresses.
So instead of mastering one insurance concept before moving on to the next, they're intentionally mixing things up.
It seems counterintuitive.
Why would they do that?
But it works. This approach forces the agents to constantly retrieve and reapply information in different ways, which makes their learning much more robust and adaptable.
Okay.
They're not just memorizing facts in isolation. They're building a deeper understanding of how those facts connect and apply in real-world scenarios.
That's amazing. I'm starting to see how Make It Stick is really turning those traditional learning methods on their head.
Yeah.
It's like everything I thought I knew about studying might be wrong.
And that's why it's so valuable.
Right.
It's about understanding how our brains actually learn and then using that knowledge to become more intentional and effective learners. But before we dive deeper into more learning hacks from Make It Stick, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this episode.
Yes.
We'll be back in a flash with more mind-blowing insights.
Awesome. I'm excited.
And it's important to remember that while interleaving is highly effective, it often feels less productive initially because it's more challenging.
It's like delayed gratification for learning, right? Embrace the struggle now for greater mastery later.
Exactly. And that perfectly ties into another powerful concept in Make It Stick.
Okay.
The growth mindset.
Growth mindset. I've heard about that.
Yeah.
It's all about believing you can develop your abilities, right?
That's the essence of it. The book dives deep into the research of Carol Dweck, a pioneer in this field. She differentiates between a fixed mindset, where you believe intelligence is set in stone, and a growth mindset, where you see effort and learning as pathways to greater ability.
It's like nature versus nurture, but for our brains.
You could say that Make It Stick argues that having a growth mindset is crucial for effective learning.
Yeah.
It encourages us to embrace challenges, persist through setbacks, and view mistakes as opportunities to grow.
I can definitely relate to that. If I believe I'm simply not good at something, I'm much more likely to give up quickly.
Right.
But if I can shift my perspective and see it as a challenge I can overcome, I'm way more likely to stick with it.
That's the beauty of the growth mindset.
Yeah.
Make It Stick suggests that if we adopt this mindset, we become much more open to those desirable difficulties and therefore more likely to achieve mastery.
Okay. I'm fully on board with the growth mindset.
Good.
But what about those moments when we hit a wall and feel like we're not making progress? Does Make It Stick address those situations?
It does. The book talks about deliberate practice, which is about pushing beyond your comfort zone and practicing with intention and a focus on improvement.
Right.
It's not just mindless repetition. It's about actively seeking out areas where you need to improve and challenging yourself to get better.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I've definitely had times when I just went through the motions while studying without really pushing myself to think critically or apply the material in new ways. It's like the difference between going for a leisurely stroll and training for a marathon.
Exactly. And Make It Stick shares a really compelling story about James Patterson, a memory champion and psychology teacher who uses mnemonic devices to help his students learn complex material.
Okay.
Get this, he can memorize an entire deck of cards in under 2 minutes.
2 minutes. I can barely remember where I put my phone sometimes.
Right. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Now, while most of us probably don't aspire to be memory champions, the point is that mnemonic techniques can be incredibly valuable tools for organizing and retrieving information, especially when you're learning something new.
So it's like giving our brains those extra hooks to hang on to the information.
Exactly.
Are there any specific mnemonic techniques that Make It Stick recommend?
They mention memory palaces, where you visualize a familiar location and mentally place the information you want to remember in different spots within that location. They also talk about the PEG method, which involves associating numbers with rhyming words and then linking those words to the information you want to remember.
Wow, those sound really interesting. I've always struggled with remembering names and dates. Maybe I should give those techniques a try.
I think you'd be surprised how effective they can be.
Yeah.
It's like giving your brain a filing system for information.
Okay, so we've got retrieval practice, mental models, interleaving growth mindset, deliberate practice, and mnemonic techniques.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of powerful tools.
It is.
Do you think Make It Stick suggests a specific order for using these techniques? Or is it more about finding what works best for each individual?
It's more about understanding the principles and then experimenting to find what works best for you.
Okay.
Make It Stick stresses that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to learning.
Yeah.
We all have different learning styles and preferences.
Right.
Right.
But I imagine there are certain principles like retrieval practice and the growth mindset that are universally beneficial regardless of your individual learning style.
Absolutely. Those are foundational principles that can benefit anyone.
Okay.
The other techniques are more like tools in a toolbox. You can choose the ones that best suit the task at hand.
It's like having a personalized learning toolkit equipped with all these evidence-based strategies. Now, I'm curious to know if Make It Stick shares any real-world examples of how these principles are being used effectively in different fields.
Okay.
It's always helpful to see how these concepts translate from theory to practice.
You're in luck, because they do.
Oh, awesome.
For example, they highlight how these principles are being used in medical schools.
Medicine is such a demanding field. I imagine effective learning techniques are essential for medical students.
Absolutely. They mention a medical student named Michael Young who completely transformed his study habits based on the principles in Make It Stick.
Okay.
He started using retrieval practice, spaced repetition, and other techniques, and it had a profound impact on his learning.
So he went from traditional methods like cramming and rereading to actually engaging with the material in a more active and meaningful way.
Exactly. And it paid off big time. He went on to excel in medical school.
Oh, wow.
Proving that these principles can work wonders even in a challenging field like medicine.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
If these techniques can help someone navigate the complexities of medical school, I'm confident they can work for anyone.
I think so.
Are there any other examples from Make It Stick that showcase the real-world application of these principles?
Definitely. They talk about how the U.S. Military Academy at West Point uses a method called the Thayer method, which incorporates many of these principles like frequent quizzing and active recall.
Wow, even the military, known for its discipline and rigor, recognizes the power of these more active learning approaches.
Right. It makes sense.
Yeah.
They want to train soldiers who can think critically, adapt to new situations, and apply their knowledge effectively under pressure.
Right.
Passive learning just doesn't cut it in those high-stakes environments.
That's a powerful testament to the effectiveness of these techniques.
Yeah.
It's not just about acing exams. It's about developing the skills and mental agility to thrive in challenging situations.
And speaking of real-world applications Make It Stick, also delves into some interesting examples of how these principles are being implemented in corporate training programs.
Oh, okay.
For instance, they highlight how Farmers Insurance uses an innovative approach to onboard new agents that incorporates many of the principles we've been discussing.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about how they're using these techniques in corporate training.
Well, as we touched on earlier, Farmers Insurance uses interleaving varied practice and deliberate creation of desirable difficulties to train their new agents.
So they're not just throwing a bunch of information at their new hires and hoping for the best.
No!
We're actually using evidence-based techniques to ensure their training is effective. I like that.
And they're seeing great results with this approach. It's a win-win for both the company and the employees. The employees learn more effectively, and the company benefits from having a more competent and skilled workforce.
It's like they're investing in the long-term success of both their employees and the company.
Exactly.
Any other examples of companies using these principles effectively?
Yes. Jiffy Lube is another great example.
Oh, cool.
They use a blended approach that combines online learning with hands-on practice and frequent testing.
So they're blending technology with practical application and ongoing feedback to ensure their technicians truly master the skills they need.
Right.
That's so smart.
And they also emphasize regular recertification, ensuring that technicians stay up to date and continue to refine their skills.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
It reinforces the idea that learning is an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
We need to keep practicing and refining our skills to maintain mastery.
Exactly. It circles back to the growth mindset, embracing the idea that there's always room for improvement, always more to learn.
I love that. It's like Make It Stick isn't just about learning techniques.
Right.
It's about fostering a lifelong love of learning and continuous improvement.
And it's important to recognize that learning doesn't have to be confined to textbooks and classrooms.
Right.
It can happen anywhere at any time as long as we approach it with intention and curiosity.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive into Make It Stick, I want to remind everyone to hit that like button and subscribe to the Book Summary Podcast. We'll be right back with some final reflections on this incredible book. We're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into Make It Stick. This book has truly changed my perspective on learning.
Yeah, it really is eye-opening.
I'm already thinking about how I can apply these principles to everything from mastering new software to learning a new language.
That's the idea.
What about you?
It's remarkable how many practical takeaways Make It Stick offers.
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
Retrieval practice, mental models, interleaving the growth mindset, deliberate practice mnemonic techniques, and so much more.
Right.
But there's one more powerful concept I'd like to highlight.
Okay.
Reflection.
Reflection, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like taking the time to pause and really absorb what you've learned.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about actively processing and making meaning of new information, connecting it to prior experiences, and even identifying areas where you need to improve, make it stick, shares compelling examples of how reflection can supercharge learning.
Okay.
They talk about a neurosurgeon, Dr. Mike Ebersold,
Okay.
who constantly reflects on his experiences in the operating room,
Wow.
analyzing what went well, what could have been done better,
Okay.
and how he can refine his skills for future surgeries.
That's a high-stakes example of reflection in action.
Yeah.
I can see how crucial it would be in a field like surgery where the consequences of mistakes can be significant.
Absolutely.
Right.
And reflection isn't limited to high-pressure professions.
Okay.
Make It Stick also highlights how athletes use reflection to enhance their performance.
Interesting.
They mention Vince Dooley, a legendary football coach who encouraged his players to mentally rehearse plays and strategies, visualizing different scenarios and how they would respond.
That's like a mental workout.
It is.
Preparing your brain for different possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about reacting in the moment, but anticipating and strategizing.
Precisely. This mental rehearsal, combined with reflection on past performances, can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It strengthens those neural pathways and helps us develop more effective decision-making skills.
So reflection isn't just about looking back.
Right.
It's about looking forward and using those insights to prepare for future challenges.
And Make It Stick even explores the role of reflection in creative fields. They discuss how John McPhee, a renowned writer, uses reflection as a core part of his writing process.
Interesting.
He often sets aside a draft, allowing his subconscious to continue working on it before revisiting it with fresh eyes.
I can relate to that. Sometimes you need to step away from a project to gain clarity and see it from a new perspective. It's like giving your brain time to process and make those connections.
That's the beauty of reflection. It gives our brains the space to integrate new information and make it meaningful.
Wow. Make It Stick is such a treasure trove of insights. It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about cultivating a mindset of continuous learning and growth.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Right.
And if we can embrace these principles and apply them consistently, we can unlock our true learning potential.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
Good to hear.
I'm already brainstorming ways to incorporate these techniques into my own life.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Remember, the key is to be intentional about your learning. Don't settle for those old, ineffective methods.
Right.
Experiment with these new strategies, find what resonates with you,
Okay.
and keep that growth mindset at the forefront.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Make It Stick, what's one big question we can leave our listeners pondering?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Something that encourages them to continue exploring these ideas.
What if, instead of fearing those moments of struggle and difficulty in learning, we embrace them as opportunities for growth?
Well, that's powerful.
What if we saw challenges not as roadblocks, but as stepping stones on the path to mastery?
That's such a powerful reframing.
Yeah.
It's about shifting our perspective on learning and seeing those moments of effort as essential for making knowledge truly stick.
I agree.
Yeah.
Learning is a journey, not a destination. Share this episode with your friends, family, or anyone eager to elevate their learning game.
Absolutely. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the Book Summary Podcast for more deep dives into books that can transform your thinking and your life.
I'll see you next time.
We'll be back soon with another episode. So stay curious, keep learning, and keep those brains firing.